going to give you a brief overview now of what everything is, but don't worry if you don't understand everything 100% right now, because as we start to work with React more and more, it will just kind of fall into place. But let's start with the node module.
Anyone asked, I didn't see any of these priceless artifacts for sale. Can I get an itemized receipt? My accountant's way too...
30 seconds until minions spawn.
I use a fake name in Demacia. Jarrow Lightfeather. Sentinel of Light, 8th Order. He's a national hero.
Something touched my foot!
Time to show them who's best. Spoiler, it's me. No way to predict the twists and turns ahead. That's why I wing it. Environment. My environment is wet and muddy and probably full of bleaches. Shadow Isles. All that I'll be omitting that little mishap from the expedition logs. I'm at my best when the world's on the brink of annihilation. I hate the word steal. I prefer liberate. So cool. Possible comebacks are so much better. Been greatly exaggerated. Nice.
An enemy has been slain. Enemy rampage.
I noticed.
Become yeah, I tried.
Death is no escape.
Once it's a ruin, I can legally loot it. boots are not waterproof. Fantastic. No plant survives first contact with me.
An enemy has been slain.
Gawk at this! When you've got talent, there's no such thing as a lucky shot. I'm always open to new ideas. My new ideas. Don't attempt anything glorious in my absence. This is really worth 10 times the asking price. Can I get an itemized... Never met a problem I can blast away with that. And I don't even understand. There's an unspoken law in archaeology. Finders keepers.
Another test.
An enemy has been slain.
I blindly teleport long distance all the time.
An ally has
That
been
belongs in a
slain.
museum. All of this.
Your
belongs in a
turret has been
museum.
destroyed.
I won't say anything. Nice. Last time I was in Shurima, I put in some glyphs. Something about, jackal head and the times. That's cool. I just wanted this ruby scarab. It looked great on my mantle. Warning shot or two. I rarely know what I'm looking for, but I always find it. Exploration runs in my family. It's in my blood. Ancient magic words.
Have been slain. An enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Your team has destroyed a turret.
Back from the dead. That confirms it. I am a god. fighting evil? That's good.
An enemy has been
Follow the
slain.
compass in their heart. Blast of gauntlet.
An enemy dominated.
This reminds me of discovering the spirit tomb of Ekron.
Death is no escape.
Feels like the whole world's gone crazy. Sounds dangerous. We may just call this a warlock exit. Shero Lightfeather never gives up. He learned that from me.
Enemy has been slain.
I always know a shortcut. The best when the world's on the brink of annihilation. All right, guys, don't miss me too much. Nothing stops me, except for shooting and parasites. It was not pretty. Water's full. Ah! Something touched my foot!
Killing spree.
More fun than I hate the word
Your turret has been
I prefer
destroyed.
liberate or procure. Possible comebacks of
Rampage.
beaten path is a boring path. Time out, everyone. Don't continue to fight that one.
Unstoppable.
They really hate me in Shuri. And in Nazi. Demacia's is warm on me. Haven't been to Ionia yet. Seems nice. I don't know the rules, then how come you making me?
Double kill. An enemy has been slain.
Nobody saw that.
Shut down.
Little mishap from the expedition logs. This reminds me of discovering the spirit tomb of Ekron. Shortcut. Once it's a ruin, I can legally. No plan survives first contact with me.
Triple kill. Aced.
have been greatly exaggerated. When you've got talent, there's no such thing as a lucky shot.
Your turret has been destroyed.
I'm always open to new
An
ideas.
enemy has been
Find your
slain.
ideas. There's an unspoken law in archaeology. Finders.
An ally has been slain. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
And Ezreal is victorious! I never miss. But I have been known to fire a warning shot or two.
Ally has been slain.
Know your environment. My environment is wet and muddy and probably... possible.
Indeed. modules. This is where all of our project dependencies live, including the React library as well, and any other package or library we need to install for the project later on is going to live inside this folder. Now, you don't really ever need to go inside this folder, just know that it's there and it's storing our dependencies. Next up, we have this public folder, which is where all of our public files public to the browser are going to live, including this index.html file. So this is the one HTML file that is served to the browser, and then all of our React code is injected into this one file right here, inside this div with an ID of root. Again, you probably won't come in here much, but if we do, don't worry, I'm going to show you how we edit things later on. Alright, so next up we have the source folder, and probably 99% of the code that you write when you're working with React is going to go inside this source folder. So all of our React components that we write are going to live inside here. And there's already one created for us called app.js. So this is what a component looks like at first glance. We're going to come back to this later on, so I don't want to spend too long here. We also have some CSS files. We have a test file, which we don't actually need. It's beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I'm going to delete that. We also have this index.js file, and this is the file that kind of kickstarts our application. So this file is responsible for taking all of our React components and mounting them to the DOM. You see right here, it's taking our app component and it's rendering it to the DOM, and it does that in that root div. Remember, if we take a look at this again, we see this has an ID of root, so that's where it's rendering our app components, which is over here, to the DOM. All right. So now if we move on, we have a logo which is currently being used inside app.js, inside that components. This one is report web vitals. It's kind of like a performance file, which we don't really need either. So I'm going to delete that. And because we deleted that, I also need to delete this import right here inside index.js and this thing down here. Okay, so make sure you delete those as well. All right, so at the end we have setup tests, which again, we're not going to cover it in this tutorial. It's kind of beyond the scope. So I'm going to delete that as well. All right, so inside the source, that's where most of your code is written, all of the different components, and the index.js file. This is what kickstarts our app. And by the way, this thing right here, react.strict mode, that means that React does additional checks during development, and it gives us warnings down in the console if there are any warnings to report. All right. So that's the source folder. Again, we'll come back to all of this later on. Now we have a git ignore file just in case we're using version control with git. And then down here we have these package files. Now this one right here, package.json, does a few things. First of all, it lists all the dependencies of the application. So anything our project depends on, which all live inside Node modules, remember. So right here, these are the testing libraries. We have React, React DOM, React scripts, and Web Vitals. So they're all the dependencies. And then down here we have some scripts as well. So we can use these scripts to do things like preview our application in a browser on a local server, or build our application for production, or test our application, or eject the Webpack file. Now, I'll show you exactly how to do this in a second. This is used to build the application for production, and these are kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, so don't worry too much about them. So that's kind of like the project overview. And again, please do not worry if that kind of went over your head. It will all become more clear as we progress through the rest of the playlist. So now what I'd like to do is show you how to take this starter project and preview it in a browser, which is going to be really important as we start to develop the project. We want to preview as we go along. So to do that, we need to open up the terminal. So go to terminal and click on new terminal. I've got a shortcut which is Control-T, and then down here we're going to run one of those scripts we just saw, and it's this one right here. So to run this script, all we need to do is say npm run and then the name of the script, which is start. So I can come down here, and it's this one right here. So to run this script, all we need to do is say npm run and then the name of the script, which is start. So we just saw, and it's this one right here. So go to terminal and click on new terminal. I've got a browser, which is going to become more clear to a Webpack file. Now for dependencies of the application. So anything our project depends on, which all live inside Node modules, remember. So right here, these are the testing libraries. We have React, React DOM, React scripts, and Web Vitals. So they're all the dependencies. And then down here we have some scripts as well. So we can use these scripts to do things like preview our application in a browser on a local server, or build our application for production, or test our application, or eject the Webpack file. Now, I'll show you exactly how to do this in a second. This is used to build the application for production, and these are kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, so don't worry too much about them. So that's kind of like the project overview. And again, please do not worry if that kind of went over your head. It will all become more clear as we progress through the rest of the playlist. So now what I'd like to do is show you how to take this starter project and preview it in a browser, which is going to be really important as we start to develop the project. We want to preview as we go along. So to do that, we need to open up the terminal. So go to terminal and click on new terminal. I've got a shortcut which is Control-T, and then down here we're going to run one of those scripts we just saw, and it's this one right here. So to run this script, all we need to do is say npm run and then the name of the script, which is start. So I can come down here and say npm run start. That is going to spin up a local development server so that we can preview the web application in a browser. And once it's complete, it'll be more clear as we progress through the rest of the source folder. Again, we'll come back to all of this later on. Is of the application. So anything our project, first of all, it lists all the dependencies of the application. So anything our project depends on, which all live inside Node modules, remember. So right here, these are the testing libraries. We have React, React DOM, React scripts, and Web Vitals. So they're all the dependencies. And then down here we have some scripts as well. So we can use these scripts to do things like preview our application in a browser on a local server, or build our application for production, or test our application, or eject the Webpack file. Now, I'll show you exactly how to do this in a second. This is used to build the application for production, and these are kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, so don't worry too much about them. So that's kind of like the project overview. And again, please do not worry if that kind of went over your head. It will all become more clear as we progress through the rest of the playlist. So now what I'd like to do is show you how to take this starter project and preview it in a browser, which is going to be really important as we start to develop the project. We want to preview as we go along. So to do that, we need to open up the terminal. So go to terminal and click on new terminal. I've got a shortcut which is Control-T, and then down here we're going to run one of those scripts we just saw, and it's this one right here. So to run this script, all we need to do is say npm run and then the name of the script, which is start. So I can come down here and say npm run start. That is going to spin up a local development server so that we can preview the web application in a browser. And once it's complete up here, we should see a get address.
Can I get an itemized receipt? My accountant's way too good at his job. Going to do great. I don't care where here is. Just point me toward adventure. Last time I was in Shurima, I decoded some glyphs. Something about
It's been served, so it's this one right here, localhost port 3000, and that's just opened up in a browser over here for me. So this is the starter project, and this right here, this content is coming from that app.js component we very, very briefly saw, and it's all being injected into that one single HTML file inside the public folder, and that's what we're seeing here. If we inspect, then we're going to see that div with an ID of root. Let me just get rid of those a little bit and scroll up, and we can see this div right here with an ID of root, and inside that we have this div with a class of app. So this is the app component that's been injected into this div, okay? So let me just quickly show you that. If we go into the source folder and then go down here and open up app, we can see this div has a class of app. We see class name, don't worry about that, we'll talk about that later on, but essentially that means an HTML class, and that is the div that's been injected into the HTML file. Now remember, it's the index.js file, which is taking this app component and it's rendering it to the DOM inside that root element. Anyway, this is a live reload server, meaning if we make a change to our code inside this app component, for example, if we then save it, it's then going to auto refresh in.
I always know a shortcut. A beaten path is a boring path. Listen, I've met exactly one Demacian I've liked.
Chasing glory, Ezreal. Boom! Headshot. This can only end. He's behind bars.
I'm in my element, fighting evil. It's good.
Brilliant.
When you've got talent, there's no
attention
such
to the
thing as
trap.
a lucky shot. Feels like the whole world's gone crazy. Right on schedule.
Accuracy.
I'm at my best when the world's on the brink of annihilation.
开我头去了，对，早，明天都要打到这个，到，
There's an unspoken law in archaeology. Finders keepers.
挺饭的，晚，
Soft as this.
你们要去哪？你们要去哪？你好胖哦！人鱼肥仔，
他认真点的，
And
对呀
Ezreal is
对啊，啊我
victorious.
不知道他的想法，我说终于在这样，
Oh,
Ôi
for
à.
the adventure.
什么？我唱了什么？唉，
An easy collar.
我不知道哎。
Now, Ezreal. I'll
这什么东西啊？
acts as
An
evidence.
enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
那是老板，
Nobody saw that.
是手机控制老板，你以为他只是开台，是吧？trop肥了，他为什么是老板？他们特别大垃圾，他们大垃圾啊，他只是偶尔会给他提供，他不是帮他那个版权套路，他是老板啊，因为他版权方是寄给他，不是
True
寄给他，
explorers follow the compass in their
寄给
heart.
他，因为他是老板。哎，你要去？
去什么？全家吗？
好啊。
I never.
哎，怎么没有人问我？
But I have been known to
Bao nhiêu
fire
nào?
a warning shot or two.
是谁？你要带我去哪？还有手机。是啊，那是你吗？你们是谁？你们做什么？你们要干嘛？你们要干嘛？大爷，你们说，小
I hate
你要带我去哪？
steal. I prefer liberate or
干嘛？
procure.
那这里是什么？还有那个小叶子。
As expected.
这是小叶子。
Sounds dangerous. I'm in.
他也有阿里巴巴的。对呀。哎，我就打太久了，都没有吃我，好微啊！
Dead. That confirms it. I am a god.
对，这种比那个。太有，没听过。应该并不知道这个。
An enemy has been slain.
哎，你们要去哪？
I totally have.
你们要去全家吗？我也要去。
Sharo Lightfeather never gives up. He learned that from me. Now I'm here. If I don't know the rules, then how can I be breaking them? No plan survives first contact with me.
Turret plating will soon fall. You have been slain. Headshot.
Brilliant.
An ally has been slain. Enemy
My
has
numbers and my death have been greatly exaggerated. Nice. You can send the bill to my own.
An enemy has been slain. Shut down.
I'm always open to new ideas. My new ideas. Exploration runs in my family. It's in my blood.
An enemy has been slain.
And my
Ally has been slain.
Water's cold. Ah! Something touched my foot!
Calibrating. Exemplary.
Reminds me of discovering the spirit of the
An ally has been slain. Shut down.
No way to predict the future ahead. That's why I wing it.
You have been slain.
Keep it together.
Shut down.
As expected.
An enemy has been slain.
I'll be omitting that little mishap from the expedition logs. balance on me. Huh. I rarely know what I'm looking for, but I always find it. That looks like a trap. Once it's a ruin, I can legally lose it. Possible comebacks are sort of my specialty.
Enemy double kill.
I'm in my element, fighting. Life is good. Brilliant.
An ally has been slain.
I always know a shortcut.
Godlike.
I'm not even breaking this way. Whoa! Time out, everyone! Don't continue to fight without me! Feels like the whole world's gone crazy. A beaten path is a boring path. All right, guys. Fancy a trip? Reminds me of discovering the spirit stream of excellence. No way to predict the twists and turns ahead. That's why I wing it. Everyone see that?
Destroyed turret.
Damn! Now I gotta go and do it again! I'm at my best when the world's on the brink. Relax. I blindly teleport long distances all the time. Worth 10 times the asking price. Can I get an itemized receipt? My accountant's way too good at his job. I don't know
Turret
what's about
has
it.
been
I
destroyed.
go out there and see it for myself. Marvelous that! an unspoken law in archaeology. Finders keepers. Know your environment. My environment is wet, muddy, and probably full of weeds.
Last I've come for you, shallow like a feather.
An enemy has been slain. Double kill. Triple kill. An ally has been slain. You have been slain.
哎，V 仔，
你们去哪？
你们是谁？IT girl is out after more Google。你看好快哦，
你们去买什么？
买东西吃啊。
那不走？
哎呦，我问你啊，
那你为什么要去哪？你不讲？
Your team has destroyed an enemy.
Beaten path is a boring path.
Legendary.
本来是去丢。
Double kill.
Who needs a map? True explorers follow the compass in their heart. Reminds me of discovering the spirit tomb of Edmund. Gawk at this! I never miss. But I have been known to fire a warning shot or two.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Twists and turns.
An enemy has been slain.
Sounds dangerous. I'm in.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
I always know a shortcut.
in the browser, which is useful. One last thing I quickly want to return our attention to is this node modules folder right here. So this contains, like I said, all the project dependencies, and it must be present for our project to work. Now, if I was to delete this folder right here and then try to start the application, let me demo this. I'm going to delete it, which might just take a second or two to do because it is very large in file size, and currently Visual Studio Code is not responding. That's always a good sign. Let's just give this a second. Okay, so that took a minute, but now it's gone. And if I was to try and run this in a browser again by typing npm run start, remember this is the command to spin up that local development server. Now notice we get all of these errors, and that's because we no longer have the node modules folder, and all of our project dependencies live inside this node modules folder, including React itself. But sometimes when you download a React project, like from GitHub, then this node modules folder is not going to be present, and that's because the node modules folder is huge in file size, and it contains the React.js library and many other JavaScript dependencies as well. And if we left it in our project when we uploaded or downloaded it to and from places like GitHub, it would take a much longer time to do. And for that reason, if we upload or download React projects, we never include the node modules folder. So if it's not present right here when you download it, how do we get it once we have the project downloaded? How do we re-get that node modules folder? Well, all we have to do is come down here and type in our project root directory npm install. And what this will do is look inside the package.json folder, which remember contains all of our project dependencies, and it will install all of them, and it will create that node modules folder, which we can see now again, and put all of the dependencies back in there. So it installs all of those for us. So that's why the package.json file is so useful. It lists all the dependencies that need to be installed if we download a project, okay? And then once this is done, we can then run the project again by using npm run serve, and it should work. So if I try this again, npm run serve now, hopefully, fingers crossed, once we get an error, it's not npm run serve, sorry, it's npm run start to serve the application, and now this should work. Yep, it's starting the development server, and pretty shortly we should see the address localhost 3000, and I can see it right over here, okay? So what is the reason I'm telling you this? Well, it's because the course files for this tutorial series are hosted on GitHub, and they won't include that node modules folder if you download them. So if you do download them, you have to run npm install down here in the terminal before you do anything else in order to get that node modules folder back. So I know this was probably a pretty heavy tutorial, which covered quite a lot, but if anything did go over your head, I promise you, as we go on, it's all going to click into... So then, components are the building blocks and the beating heart of any React application. And a typical web page built with React might be made up of several different components, where each component is normally a self-contained section of content. For example, a navbar in a website might be a component, an article might be a component, and a sidebar might be a component, etc. It's basically our job as a React developer to create these components, which are then rendered to the DOM and shown in the web page by React. Now, each of these components will contain all of their own templates and all of their own logic for that piece of content. For example, a navbar component will contain a template which makes up the HTML for this bit of content, but also any JavaScript logic, like a function which runs when maybe a logout button is clicked. Now, React components allow us to do these things really, really easily. So to begin with, in our application, we only have one single component which is being rendered, and that is this component right here, app. And by the way, I'm inside the index.js file, inside the source folder. This is the file, remember, which kickstarts our application. And at the minute, what it's doing is taking this app component right here, and it's rendering it to the DOM at this position, so the element with an ID of root. So then this component right here, all of the content inside that component is being rendered to the browser, and that's what we're seeing right here. All of this content is this content over here. So this component, this is known as the root component. Now, we'll talk more about what a root component means later on, but essentially, this is the only component at the minute, is this content over here. Components allow us to do these things really, really easily. Might be a component, and a sidebar might be a component, etc. It's basically our job as a React developer to create these components, which are then rendered to the DOM and shown in the web page by React. Now, each of these components will contain all of their own templates and all of their own logic for that piece of content. For example, a navbar component will contain a template which makes up the HTML for this bit of content, but also any JavaScript logic, like a function which runs when maybe a logout button is clicked. Now, React components allow us to do these things really, really easily. So to begin with, in our application, we only have one single component which is being rendered, and that is this component right here, app. And by the way, I'm inside the index.js file, inside the source folder. This is the file, remember, which kickstarts our application. And at the minute, what it's doing is taking this app component right here, and it's rendering it to the DOM at this position, so the element with an ID of root. So then this component right here, all of the content inside that component is being rendered to the browser, and that's what we're seeing right here. All of this content is this content over here. So this component, this is known as the root component. Now, we'll talk more about what a root component means later on, but essentially, this is the only component at the minute which is being rendered to the DOM. And inside this component, we can see it is basically a function called app, and that returns what looks like some HTML code. Now, this function could be an arrow function if you prefer, but it has to start with a capital letter. So this one is called app, and it returns this code right here. Like I said, it looks like an HTML template, and this is all of the stuff, all of the content we're seeing over here, but this is not actually HTML. It's something called JSX. Now, it has a syntax almost identical to HTML, but there are some differences which we're going to talk about later on. So JSX allows us to easily create these HTML style templates and components, and in the background, a transpiler called Babel converts all of this JSX template into HTML when we save the file, and it renders that HTML to the DOM, okay? So you don't have to worry too much about how this happens, but just know that this kind of thing is going on in the background, and this template code right here is JSX.
Minions has spawned.
How positively retro. Stop him before he does something tragic. No escape. Hi! The future's only held in the barrel of my... I'm gonna want that back! Time I know this road. Temporal field stabilized. Of course time can be broken. Why do you think I have a gun? It's now or never. Can't feel a headshot. Chrono recall engaged. Here's a warning. It's a trap. Now, there's the smell you can Temporal sync reset. Time for the trigger. Time has laws. Time is laws. Got some kick. Pulsefire jump complete. Experience superior technology. Time of the essence. I don't need roads.
Enemy killing spree.
Any time, any place, I will find them.
Enemy rampage.
Time warp field regenerating.
More powder.
Everyone wants more time. You know what I like best? Bigger guns.
Turret plating will fall soon.
Reality is held together by laws. It's not the past that drives me. It's the future.
An enemy has been slain. Double kill. Ally has been slain.
I take out trash. Temporary.
Enemy killing spree.
Chronostasis field disengaged. When has the old Time Explorer gotten off to? Awareness of the present is the key to having a future.
Enemy double kill. Enemy rampage. Enemy rampage.
Temporal field stabilized.
Enemy double kill.
Temporal sync reset. We can't just see the past. We have to observe. spree.
An enemy has been slain.
Pulsefire jump complete.
Your turret has been destroyed.
Where could he be? In the end, I will always catch you. You're an anomaly. I am an anomaly. Time for your mission.
Enemy double kill.
Time warp field regenerating.
哎，所以你的是 GIF 啊？
没办法，SVG 效果不好，它切换的时候会闪烁。
哦，为什么啊？是计算太慢了吗？
不是，它是先把图片藏起来，然后再把图片放新的上去，中间就闪了一下。
理论上应该可以，应该是可以的吧？它连动画都能做了。
不知道啊，GIF 是绝对不会有这个问题啊。 这活动效果蛮漂亮的。嗯。你没有读我的讯息。然后是浏览器内建的，我本来以为要用特殊的函式库，后来发现是内建的，那就好了。你不觉得 terms and condition 放在这里很诡异吗？terms and condition 啊，总觉得怪怪，总觉得哪里怪怪的。
太恐
这感觉很像一张账单哎，还是一个什么网页坏掉的。
当我看过最可能是，可能就是太便宜了。
哦，我室友要睡觉了，我必须挂断电话了。不好意思啊。
No cure for fools.
Are you the hunter or the prey? Summoner's Rift.
Going to do great.
30 seconds until minions spawn.
The first wave is upon us. Feed the beast. Albeit small.
Minions have spawned.
I came back for the others who could not. I survived the void. I refuse to let death end. I refuse to accept it as my fate. Monsters are everywhere. Stay alert. Stay aggressive. Yes. It's a good day for a hunt.
This world is changing. We decided.
I am not afraid. Hold our ground. Attack them and theirs. This world is changing. We decide into life.
First blood.
Exploit their mistakes. Damn it. Take your time, I'm right here.
You have slain an enemy.
That's one. I came for the hunt. Stay for the fruit. cool breeze. I remember these. Reminds me of home. Exploit their weakness. That'll leave a mark. Forgiveness is hard, but so very worth it. I will not. Get up, stand firm, strike hard. This skin is fashioned for survival, and home.
An enemy has been slain.
I grew up deep inside a vast emptiness. I do not
An
wish to grow
ally
old.
has been slain.
That is why we must fight.
An enemy has been slain.
Some recoil at the sight of me. Underneath the shell, would they see me just once?
Turret plating will fall soon.
I need to get.
You have slain an enemy. An enemy has been slain.
That's fine.
Has been slain. has been slain.
Whatever it's called.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Motivates everyone.
An ally has been slain.
So it comes. My sister.
You have been slain. Destroyed a turret. Shut down. Your turret has been destroyed. An ally has been slain.
The void.
An enemy has been slain. Double kill.
I came back all the others who could not. Love, fear, whatever it's called, it's survival.
Your team has destroyed the turret.
I returned stronger than I left.
Double kill. Slain. Your turret has been destroyed. Killing spree. Shut down. Ally has been slain.
In the This suit hunts in the manner I choose. I'll be back. I can make a difference here.
Slain.
Yes! 6. Running is only half. Void rule number 1. Don't die. Marked by the void. This thing lives on me.
team has destroyed a turret.
This. Learn. That's enough for the moment. The hunt will resume. That was pointless. This place is beautiful. I'm going to save it.
You have been slain. An ally has been slain.
The yoke of fear is a heavy one. Hunters must be nimble and will...
An enemy has been slain.
7. Got one. It's fighting. This skin lit on me.
An enemy has been slain. Your turret has been destroyed. Enemy killing spree.
It's the spot.
Your turret has been destroyed.
Of light.
Shut down.
How about
JSX. Now, one big difference between JSX and HTML is the way we add classes to elements, because in JSX we use this attribute, class name, and it's also camel case. Notice N is a capital. Now, the reason we can't use just class is because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, and at the end of the day, we're in a JavaScript file right here, so we can't use class. We use class name in JSX, and then when this is converted into HTML, it changes this attribute into just class. So if we inspect this over here, we're going to see that it should have a class of app, so it doesn't say class name, just class. Okay, so that's one difference, and there are other differences which we'll see later on as well. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention is that in older versions of React, less than version 17, you need to import React at the top of the file inside components for them to work. Notice we don't import React anywhere up here. We import these other things, but not React. So if you're using version 16, for example, and not the latest version, for this to work, you might see in your file something like this: import React from React, like this, and then this file would work. But in version 17, we don't need to do that, okay? Well, that's important if you're using an older version. So there's one more thing I want to do in this video, and that's to remove most of this template content right here. So everything inside the div with the class name of app, we'll keep this to surround our code. So we have to return this template inside a component, right? And now we have this empty div, but I also want inside that div with a class of content. So I'll say div.content. And this was the emit setup I talked about in the first video, because now if I press tab, it's going to create that div with a class name of content. All right, so inside that, I'm going to do an h1, and this is just going to say app component, like so. And now I'm going to save this. And in fact, we can take away this import for the logo. We used that before inside the template, but we don't anymore. So let's get rid of that and save this file. And now if we come to the browser, this was the emit component, right? And now we have this empty div, but I also want inside that a div with a class of content. So I'll say div.content. And this was the emit setup I talked about in the first video, because well, that's important if you're using an old React like this, and then this file would work. But in version 17, it might anywhere up in here. Thing is going on in the background, and this takes components. And in the background, a transpiler called Babel converts all of this JSX template into HTML when we save the file, and it renders that HTML to the DOM. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about how this happens, but just know that this kind of thing is going on in the background, and this template code right here is JSX. Now, one big difference between JSX and HTML is the way we add classes to elements, because in JSX we use this attribute, class name, and it's also camel case. Notice N is a capital. Now, the reason we can't use just class is because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, and at the end of the day, we're in a JavaScript file right here, so we can't use class. We use class name in JSX, and then when this is converted into HTML, it changes this attribute into just class. So if we inspect this over here, we're going to see that it should have a class of app, so it doesn't say class name, just class. Okay, so that's one difference, and there are other differences which we'll see later on as well. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention is that in older versions of React, less than version 17, you need to import React at the top of the file inside components for them to work. Notice we don't import React anywhere up here. We import these other things, but not React. So if you're using version 16, for example, and I think of app, so it doesn't say class name, just class. Okay, so that's one difference, and there are other differences which we'll see later on as well. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention is that in older versions of React, less than version 17, you need to import React at the top of the file inside components for them to work. Notice we don't import React anywhere up here. We import these other things, but not React. So if you're using version 16, for example, and not the latest version, for this to work, you might see in your file something like this: import React from React, like this, and then this file would work. But in version 17, we don't need to do that, okay? But that's important if you're using an older version. So there's one more thing I want to do in this video, and that's to remove most of this template content right here. So everything inside the div with the class name of app, we'll keep this to surround our code. So we have to return this template inside a component, right? And now we have this empty div, but I also want inside that div with a class of content. So I'll say div.content. And this was the emit setup I talked about in the first video, because now if I press tab, it's going to create that div with a class name of content. All right, so inside that, I'm going to do an h1, and this is just going to say app components, like so. And now I'm going to save this, and in fact, we can take away this import for the logo. We used that before inside the template, but we don't anymore. So let's get rid of that and save this file. And now if we come to the browser, we see this very simple template. And also, we can delete this logo over here. We're not going to be using it in our project, so get rid of that as well. So then, this thing right here, this is just one single component. And I said before that React websites can be made up of many different components. So later on, we will be adding more components to this as well. In the next video, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the template and how we can output dynamic values inside the template. But before we move on, just one more thing I want to mention, and that is this thing right at the bottom of the file over here, the export. So at the end, we always export our component function, and that's so that we can use it in other files. And right here,
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
The world is
Silver
Stay
of the
focused.
moon. 30 seconds until minions spawn. Evil lurks around every corner.
here inside the index.js, we're doing exactly that. We import this app component from /app, so this file, and then we're using it right here, and this is then being rendered.
I smell black magics. Cleansing blood. An ally has been slain. Beware. You have been slain. An enemy has been slain. I hear the innocent cry out. In the dark, all is laid bare. I bring swift death. On wings of night. An ally has been slain. Enemy double kill. Evil lurks around every corner. The dark should fear me. I smell black magics. Beware.
I will remember your name and shout it to the heavens.
I hear the innocent cry out. An enemy has been slain. In the dark, all is lost. Shut down. I release them from their pain. They will be purified. on wings of night. Evil lurks around every corner. Cleansing blood with silver. The dark should fear me. An ally has been slain. I smell.
Turret plating will fall soon.
Beware. I bring swift death.
Has been slain. You have slain an enemy.
I pass judgment.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
I hear the innocent cry out.
Has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Your turret has been destroyed. An ally has been slain.
The shadow
Shut down. An ally has been slain.
on wings of night. Evil lurks around every corner. The dark should be I smell black magics.
An ally has been slain. An ally has been slain. Your turret has been destroyed.
Beware.
Shut down. Your turret has been destroyed. Your team has destroyed a turret.
So I hear the innocent cry out. In the dark, all laid bare. I bring swift death. I pass judgment.
Enemy rampage.
The shadows are to be feared.
You have been slain. Executed. Shut down. Double kill. An ally has been slain. Shut down.
I smell black
Your
magic.
team has destroyed a turret.
Beware. I hear the innocent cry out. In the dark, all is laid bare. shadows are to be feared. Evil lurks around. Killing spree. Shut down. I hear the innocent cry out.
Dear friends, please stop dying. Love, Aksha.
In the dark. Shadows are to be feared. Double kill. Enemy double kill. Aced.
The body of flame.
Has destroyed a turret. An ally has been slain. Has destroyed a turret. On wings. Has destroyed a shut down. should fear me. I smell black magics. Beware. I hear the
An enemy has been slain.
Yes, yes. You can thank me later.
To the DOM using the React DOM library. Okay, so a component in a nutshell is a function, and then we always must return something inside that function, and generally that's going to be a JSX template. And then at the bottom, we export that component so we can use it elsewhere as well. So another good thing about JSX templates in React is that we can output dynamic values or variables inside it. So imagine we wanted to output a blog title on the screen. Well, yeah, we could hard code it right here. We could just write it in the H1, but we could also output a variable instead right here. Now, we can create the variable inside the function before the return template. So I'm going to say const, and then we'll call this title and set it equal to something. And by the way, you can write any valid JavaScript inside this function before we return the JSX template. So all of this is fine. And I'm going to set this equal to welcome to the new blog. So if I want to output this value, this variable, inside the template, I can do. All I need to do is use curly braces and then the variable name. So when we use curly braces like this, React knows we want to output a dynamic value or variable. So it's going to look for the value of this variable up here, and it's going to output that right here inside the H1. So if I save this and preview, we can see that value on the screen. Awesome. Now we can output multiple values inside this template right here. All we have to do is create them at the top. So I could create another one called likes and set that equal to something like 50. And then down here, I'm going to do a paragraph tag and say liked, and then curly braces to output a variable, and then likes, and then I'll say times. So it should say liked, then 50 times. If I save this and preview, before it outputs it to the browser. For example, if I try come over here, I'm going to refresh, notice we get an error. Output this down here, paragraph tag, and then person, like so. If I save this, come over here, I'm going to refresh, notice we get an error, and we can't output this object. So numbers, strings, and arrays fine, booleans and objects we can't. So let me just comment these out so they don't cause an error and save it. Now, as well as outputting variables, we can also write the dynamic values directly into curly braces. So for example, I could write any kind of JavaScript statement inside these curly braces that returns a valid value, either a string, a number, or an array. So let me just do a number like this, and it outputs 10. Let me do another example, another paragraph tag, and this time I want to output a string. Well, we just use quotes for that and say hello ninjas, like so, save it, and we see that string. Do another example, I'm going to output an array, so curly braces, and then an array. Inside here, I'll just say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and save that, and we can see this array. All it does is bunch all of the different elements in the array together, and it outputs those as a string, and then after this, we can also output little evaluations like this. I could use the math object, .random, and then maybe times that by 10. Like so. So it's going to evaluate this, which returns us a number, and then it's going to output that number as a string in the browser. So if I save this, you can see we get a random number. If I refresh, it's going to be different each time around, okay? So another thing we can do in JSX is use these dynamic values as attribute values in element tags. So for example, we could have an anchor tag, and this has an href attribute. Now normally, we put the attribute as a string right here to a website, for example, http www.google.com, like so. I'm just going to say over here, Google site. But in JSX, this can be a dynamic value. So I could cut this and store it in a variable at the top over here. Const link is equal to the string we just created. And then down here, if I want to use a dynamic value for an attribute, I just use curly braces. So we don't need the quotes first and then curly braces, it's just curly braces, and then we put the dynamic value inside curly braces. So the name of the constant, link, for example. If I save this now and come over here, I'm going to inspect this to make sure we have the right href, yep, and it's popped in that dynamic value to the href right here. Now at the moment, things like this might seem a little bit pointless, but later on, when you start to work with dynamic data, then it becomes very, very useful. For example, you might have a list of blog titles from a database, and each blog title must be a link. Now that link is going to be dynamically output to each blog, because each blog title should click through to a different blog detail page, right? So we're going to see more of this as we go forward.
Just isn't finished yet.
Alright then gang, so we have a single component so far in our application, this one right here, app.js. This is the component that is initially rendered inside our HTML file. In our case, that component is called app.js. Then if we were to make more components, we nest them inside this root one. So if we made components for a navbar, some blog details, sidebar, etc., all of those components would be nested inside this root app component. And then if we make further components, they could be nested inside these ones as well. So this makes up our component tree. And we're going to start by just making a navbar component, which is going to sit inside our root app component at the top. Alright then, so to make a new component, the first thing we need is a new file, which I'm going to make inside the source folder, and this will be called navbar.js. Now remember, a component is just a function which returns a JSX template, and then that function is exported at the bottom of the file. Now remember that package I told you to install to VS Code, which was called simple React snippets, this thing over here? Well, I'm going to use a snippet to create a functional component right here. So this is SFC and then tab, and it creates what's known as a stateless functional component. So all I need to do now is give this a name, which I'm going to call navbar with a capital N, and then we have our boilerplate component. Now notice this time that this is an arrow function, unlike this one. Now it doesn't matter, like I said, it can be an arrow function if you prefer, and I generally create arrow functions for my components. But either way, it doesn't matter. So inside here, we now need to return some kind of template. The first thing I'm going to do is a nav with a class of navbar, and then inside that I'm going to do an h1, and that h1 is going to say the date. The first thing I'm going to do is a nav with a class of navbar, and then inside that, inside here, we now need to return some kind of template. The first thing I'm going to do is a nav with a class of navbar, and then inside that I'm going to do an h1, and that h1 is going to say the dojo blog. And below the h1, I will do another div with a class of links, and these are going to be the links in our navigation. So let's do an anchor tag for the first one. That's going to go to just /, which will ultimately be the home page, and we'll say home for the text. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to change the href right here to /create, and this is going to be to later create a new blog. So we'll just type here, new blog. Now at the minute, this is not going to work because we've not set up multiple pages or anything like that yet, but when we come to work with routing later on in the course, this will work then, okay? But for now, we just want some content output to the browser. So that's pretty much it. That's our template for the navbar, and we're exporting this function at the bottom. So now what we need to do is import this navbar into this app root component, and then nest it somewhere inside this template. So the first thing we need to do is import it. So I can say import the navbar, and it's going to be from, and then it's // to say the current directory, and then navbar. We don't need to say .js when we're using this import. It figures that out itself. Okay, so now we can nest it down here, and I'm going to nest it just above the content div right here, because all the page content will ultimately go inside here, but the navbar I'm going to place above that. Now to do this, we just say navbar, and then close this tag. So it's self-closing, and this name is this name right here, okay? So this doesn't have to be self-closing. You can do an opening and closing tag as well if you prefer, but if...
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
You're going to do great! This will do. Trespassers will be shot, then looted, then
30 seconds until minions spawn.
Aged like a fine egg.
I may be outnumbered, but even the odds can stand against me.
Minions have spawned.
All pipes lead to home. I'm gonna want that back!
First blood.
Gotta die sometime.
Active temporal blaster.
I'll be right under their noses.
An enemy has
It's
been slain.
me! Plenty more where that came from. Seriously, I carry a lot of ammo. And it'll be perfect. I can't even taste the air up here. Dip it in soil, leave it in the sun for a while. Oh yes, it's perfect. Yes. Now, there's a smell you can feel!
Shut down. Double kill.
Hope that gets in. You're looking a little green. Oh, yes, yes. I'm on to you. You're welcome. You can marvel at that. They're planning something.
You have slain an enemy.
Oh, hello!
We're killing buddies. I have the best aim in the spirit realm.
Following me. Right under the
Kings and
I demand.
Killing spree. Enemy double kill.
Watch your step.
Shut down. An enemy has been slain.
Hey, what did I Sticky, don't drop Have you met my fleas?
Enemy rampage.
Who let all these plants survive?
Gauntlet.
An enemy has been slain. Turret plating will fall soon. Your team has destroyed a turret.
It's me!
We did it! We knocked him over!
I dealt it! It was me!
Shut down. Shut down. An ally has been slain.
What? Rust is like more delicious mold. Here's a warning. It's a trap. Shot. I'm gonna want that. Aged like a fine egg. All pipes lead to home. They are the plague.
You have slain an enemy.
I grease these all myself.
I knocked it over!
Now there's a smell you can feel. What's yours?
An enemy has been slain.
Mine. I licked it. From out of the sewers comes doom.
I'm not done yet.
An ally has been slain.
I can't even taste the air up here.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
It's me!
An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
Dip it in soon.
I thought we were playing! Are you
Oh,
dead?
yes, it's perfect. Yes. Clutch. Oh, hello!
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Oh, yes, yes.
An enemy has been slain.
I'm on to you.
Killing spree. Your team has destroyed a turret. Shut down. An enemy has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Has destroyed a turret.
Are you gonna finish that? They're planning something. Hey, what did I say?
Shut down.
Oh, hello! You're welcome. It's sticky. Don't drop it. I'll be right under. Who let all these plants survive?
Has destroyed a turret. An ally has been slain.
Don't trust any liquid you can see through. Sneaky, sneaky. What the hell? Rust is like more delicious mold. Aged like a fine egg. How do you aim with all this light? I'll be right under the moon. All pipes lead to home. They are the plague.
I guess we're
Your team has destroyed a turret. An enemy has been slain. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor.
boom, baby.
Hi! From out of the sewers comes doom. I can't even taste the air up here. Oh, yes. Yes.
Double kill.
It's me!
Your team has destroyed a turret. Your team has destroyed
I'm on to you!
If you don't close the tag, then you need it to be self-closed over here, okay? So save this, and it works. We can see that navbar component at the top. Let me just show you the other way. If we were to do a closing tag instead, save that and refresh, this still works. I generally go with the self-closing tag instead. Okay, so that's our second component. Now we have two. We have the app root one and the navbar, which is nested inside the root component. Now, I also want to do a component for the homepage content because I don't just want to create all inside this root component. I want to make a separate component for the content of the homepage. So let me do that by first of all creating a new file called home.js, and then inside here, another stateless functional component, press tab, and I'm going to call this home. Now, inside these parentheses, I'm going to return a template div with a class of home, and I'm applying these classes so that later on we can style them in the CSS. And inside this, we'll just do an h2 that says homepage, and that will do for now. So again, I want to nest it now inside this component. So the first thing I need to do is import it. So import home from /home, and then I can nest it down here inside this div. So I'm going to get rid of this h1, and instead I'll put the home component just as a tag. And now we should see that content on the page. Awesome. So that's how we create multiple different components and then import them into other components and nest them. And if I wanted to, I could also create a further component and nest it in one of these I've just created, like the home or the navbar. And we're going to see more of that as we go forward. But next up, I want to take a look at using CSS in our project. Alright then, so we have our three different components now. We have the root component, app.js, the home component, and also the navbar one as well. Now what I'd like to do is add some CSS to those components, but how do we do that? Well, if we take a look at this root component, we already see this import, app.css, and it's coming from this CSS file right here. So when we created the boilerplate React application, it came with these styles for the root component over here. Now anything inside this app.css file is going to be applied to not only the app.js components, but also any component that is in the browser at that time. That's because React just takes all of these styles and it adds them to the head of the web page. So if we take a look over here, if we inspect and go to the elements and take a look inside the head, we're going to find a styles tag at some point with all of those styles inside them. It's this one right here, okay? So bear that in mind. These styles, if we import them into a component, are not only going to style what's in that component, but also anything else that is being displayed on the page at that time as well. So it doesn't really scope the styles to a single component. Now, you could use something called CSS modules to scope your styles, or use something called style components, but that's not something I want to get into right now, but maybe in the future I'll do playlists about these. So, having separate CSS files for different components in our case at the minute is mainly just an organization thing. For large projects, I might sometimes do this, but a lot of the time when I'm doing smaller projects, I just have a single CSS file, this index.css file right here, and add pretty much all of my CSS into that. And this would kind of be like a global style sheet, and it would apply to all components. So this index.css file is then imported into this index.js file right here, and what this does then is take all of those styles and adds them inside the head again of the web page, and it's going to appear there all of the time. So if we take a look at this, it's the first style tag, and it's this stuff right here. So that's generally the approach I'm going to be taking for this project. So what I'm going to do is actually delete this app.css file and delete its import right here. Make sure you do that, otherwise you'll get an error, and then save it. And then going forward, I'm just going to use this index.css file for all of my styles. So then let's flesh this out a bit. The first thing I'm going to do is delete the current content, and then I'm going to paste in, first of all, an import, which is for a Google font called Quicksand. So I got this from Google Fonts, and by the way, you can just copy and paste all of these styles from my repo. Remember, the link to this is in the description down below. So that's the Google font I'm going to use for this project. Next, I'm also going to just copy and paste some base styles, because I'm pretty sure you don't want to watch me type out a load of CSS. If you want to learn about CSS, I've got tons of playlists on my channel about that. Anyway, I will quickly go through them. Right here, I'm targeting every element with the asterisks and stripping out margin, applying a font family of Quicksand, which is this we imported, and a text color of a dark grey. Now, the navbar right here, which remember is this thing over here, I'm styling that, giving it some padding, displaying as flex, aligning the items at center, and that's vertically at its center, not horizontally. We give this a max width and a margin of 0 auto. We also give it a border bottom as well. The H1 in the navbar, we make this a red pink color. The links, we say margin left auto. That shoots them over to the right because the parent is displayed as flex. Then the anchor tags, we say margin left of 16 pixels. We take away the text decoration and give them some padding. When we hover over those links, we turn them that ready color. And then the content, which remember is right here, so it's surrounding the home component at the minute. We say right here, give this a max width as well of 600 pixels. Margin 40 pixels top and bottom, auto left and right to centralize it, and then a padding of 20 pixels. So some very simple styles. Now if I come over here and refresh, we should see those styles take effect. Awesome. So that looks a little bit nicer. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's how to add some inline styling. So let's do that inside the navbar component, and we'll style this link right here. So you know in regular HTML, we can do a style property, and we set it equal to a value, which is a string, and then add the different CSS properties in here. Now we can do a similar thing inside JSX, but this time it can be a dynamic value. And remember, when we want a dynamic value, we use curly braces. Now, the value of this is going to be an object in itself, so we need another pair of curly braces inside the outer ones. So the outer ones represent a dynamic value to tell React, look, we're using a dynamic value for the style attribute, and this set of curly braces inside, this is the object, the JavaScript object, okay? So inside this object, we do different key and value pairs. The key is going to be the CSS property, and the value, the CSS value for that property. So for example, I could say color for the key, and then the value is always a string, and in our case, it's going to be white. So the text is white for this link. Then we do a comma and do another key. So for example, background color. Now this is where it gets a bit different, because in CSS, it's background hyphen color. But remember, we're in a JavaScript file, and this looks a lot like a minus sign. So we don't do this when we're using JSX for CSS. We just camel case it like this, background color, and we set that equal to a value. Now I'm going to use the same hex code as this over here, JS brown, so Java to centralize it, and then so it's the links we say margin left auto, that shoots them over to the right because the parent is displayed as flex. Then the anchor tags, we say margin left of 16 pixels, we take away the text decoration and give them some padding. When we hover over those links, we turn them that ready color, and then the content, which remember is right here, so it's surrounding the home component at the minute. We say right here, give this a max width as well of 600 pixels, margin 40 pixels top and bottom, auto left and right to centralize it, and then a padding of 20 pixels. So some very simple styles. Now if I come over here and refresh, we should see those styles take effect. Awesome, so that looks a little bit nicer. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's how to add some inline styling. So let's do that inside the navbar components, and we'll style this link right here. So you know in regular HTML, we can do a style property, and we set it equal to a value, which is a string, and then add the different CSS properties in here. Now we can do a similar thing inside JSX, but this time it can be a dynamic value. And remember, when we want a dynamic value, we use curly braces. Now the value of this is going to be an object in itself, so we need another pair of curly braces inside the outer ones. So the outer ones represent a dynamic value to tell React, look, we're using a dynamic value for the style attribute, and this set of curly braces inside, this is the object, the JavaScript object, okay? So inside this object, we do different key value pairs. The key is going to be the CSS property and the value, the CSS value for that property. So for example, I could say color for the key, and then the value is always a string, and in our case, it's going to be white. So the text is white for this link. Then we do a comma and do another key. So for example, background color. Now this is where it gets a bit different because in CSS, it's background hyphen color. But remember, we're in a JavaScript file, and this looks a lot like a minus sign. So we don't do this when we're using JSX for CSS. We just camel case it like this, background color, and we set that equal to a value. Now I'm going to use the same hex code as this over here. So let me copy that and paste it in. And then finally, we'll do one more. We'll give this a border radius, again, camel case, and we'll set that equal to 8 pixels. So 8 pixels like so. All right then, so this is how we do inline styling. A dynamic value, which is an object with key value pairs. If we save this and preview, now we can see this has taken effect. Now, I'm not going to be keeping that style, so I am just going to delete all of that, but I did want to show you how to do it in case you want to do that for some of your elements. Alright then, so when we have a website, typically there's loads of different events going on inside the website when you browse it. Things like hover events, or click events, or form submission events, keyboard events, scroll events, loads and loads. Now in this video, we're just going to look at click events, which is when a user clicks on something. And I'm going to show you how to react to those events by running some code. So, first of all, let's create a button inside the home component underneath the H2, and the text is going to be click me. So I want to react now to a user clicking on this button, and I want to fire a function when they do that. So first of all, I'm going to create this function inside a home component function at the top, and we'll store it in a constant, which I'm going to call handle click. And typically, you'll see the different functions called something like this, like handle click, or handle mouse over, or handle submit, or something like that. That's just a naming convention, but you can call the functions whatever you want. So inside this arrow function, all I'm going to do is log a message to the console, and the message is going to be hello ninjas. All right, so if I now save this, nothing's going to happen when I click on this because I've not linked up this function to this button, so it doesn't know to run that function yet. Let's open the console already anyway, just so we can see that in a minute. So then, how do we hook this up? Well, all we need to do is go to the button and say on click with a capital C and set that equal to a dynamic value, so curly braces. And we just pass in a function reference, so whatever the function is called, which is handle click. Now, we don't invoke the function because if we were to save this, then it's going to invoke this automatically without the user even clicking on it, and we can see this logs to the console right away. We don't want to do that. We don't want to invoke it. We just want to set a reference to that function right here. Then when a user clicks on this, it will invoke that function for us. So let's save this. I'm going to clear out the console and let's click on this and it works. Click again, it does it again. So that's how we can create a function and assign it to an element so that it fires when a user clicks on it by using this on click property right here and then passing in a function or reference. So what if we want to pass in an argument to the function? For example, if I wanted to pass in a name, well, normally what we do is use parentheses and pass in the name, for example, Yoshi, right? But like I said before, if we do this, then it's going to automatically invoke this function right away because the parentheses invoke the function. So we can't do this if we want to pass in an argument. Instead, we have to wrap this inside an anonymous function. So I'm going to do another button to demo this. So I'll say click me again, and then up here, I'm going to create another function, so const, and I'll call this handle click again and set it equal to an arrow function. And inside here, we're going to take as a parameter the name, okay? And I'll log that to the console, so console.log, and then I'll say hello, and I'll concatenate the name, so plus name. You could use a template string if you wish. I'm just using concatenation. So now I want to fire this function when we click on this button. So again, on click is equal to a dynamic value, which is handle click again. Okay, so now if we save it, it's going to fire this function, but we're not passing in the name yet. And like I said, we can't pass that in directly right here because it's going to invoke that function. So how do we do this? Well, we do need to pass in the argument, so let's just do that. I'm going to pass in Mario, and then what we need to do is then wrap this inside an anonymous function. So let me cut this for now, and instead I'm just going to do an arrow function right here like so. Now this is a function which will then fire when a user clicks on this button. So inside here, I could just say console.log hello, right? And this is going to do the same thing as this. We're not invoking this function right here, we're just referencing it, right? It's an anonymous one. We don't store it in a constant or anything like that. We just create it directly here, but we're still not invoking that. And then when a user clicks on this button, it's going to fire the function. So let's test this out first of all. Click me again, and we see hello. So now what we could do is inside this function, we could just invoke this other function. So now this is not going to be invoked straight away because it's being wrapped in an anonymous function which isn't firing to begin with. So only now when we click on this button, it fires this function and then invokes the other one which passes in the name. So if I save this now, it should work. Click me again. Hello Mario. Awesome. So that works. Now if I wanted to, I could do this all in one line by bringing this up and bringing this up as well. And we don't really need these curly braces now because it's on one line for the function. So let's delete that one and this one. We still keep these curly braces because this signifies a dynamic value. The other ones were just for the anonymous function. So this is still going to work. Let me save that and test again. And we see hello Mario. Awesome. So that works. Now, one more thing I want to show you is the event object or the event parameter that we automatically get access to inside these functions when an event occurs. So this one right here, where we just reference a function, it automatically gains as the first parameter the event object. And then we can do something with that event object. Let me just log it to the console so you can see the different information on that object. If I save it and come over here and click this first button, we see hello ninjas, but then also this event object. And we can see all of these different properties about the event if we wanted to use them. Now, what about the other one? Because we don't automatically get it as a first argument inside this function because it's not being referenced as the function. This one right here, this anonymous function, gets access to the event object automatically. Then if we want to use it inside our custom function, we can just pass it in as an argument, and it can be first or second, it doesn't really matter. So I can pass it in right here. So I take the automatic argument from the function that wraps this and pass it into this custom function as a second argument, and then I can use it inside this function. So after name, I could say E, and then say I just want the target. I could use the target property, for example. That was just one of the properties on this object. And then if I click on this, we can see we get the event target. Awesome. So that's how we can react to click events in our components. Okay then, so in our project so far, we haven't talked about state or data much. Now, when we talk about the state of a component, we just mean the data being used in that component at that point in time. Now, that state could be an array of values, booleans, strings, objects, or any other data that our component uses. Now, we created some variables and we used them in our template before, which work, but what if we had variables or data that we wanted to change over time or in reaction to some event like a user clicking a button? Well, let's first of all try that. So notice at the minute, I still have this button, which references this handle click function, and there's nothing in there at the minute. Now, let's create a variable. So I'm going to say let's name equal to Mario. And then what I want to do is output this name inside the template. So p tag and then output the name. Now, if I preview this, it's going to show that name and it works. But what if when I click on this button, I want to change this name? Well, let's try it. It references this function. So inside the function, I could take the name and update it to Luigi, like so. And then what do you think will happen? Will it update here in the template where we output it once we click the button and it changes? Well, let's give this a whirl. I'm going to go over here and refresh. And if I click this button, it doesn't change in the templates. Now, the name itself changes, and I can demo that by logging it to the console. So this value right here, that changes. So if we see this, click me, we see Luigi. It just doesn't update in the template. Now, it doesn't update in the template because the variable that we created over here is not reactive. Now, by that, I mean that React doesn't watch it for changes or react to it changing. So when the value does change, it doesn't trigger and it changes. Well, let's give this a whirl. I'm going to go over here and refresh. And if I click this button, it doesn't change in the templates. Now, the name itself changes, and I can demo that by logging it to the console. So this value right here, that changes. So if we see this, click me, we see Luigi. It just doesn't update in the template. Now, it doesn't update in the template because the variable that we created over here is not reactive. Now, by that, I mean that React doesn't watch it for changes or react to it changing. So when the value does change, it doesn't trigger React to re-render the template with that new value inside it. Nothing happens, and we continue to see the old value in the browser. So in order for this to work, we have to make the value reactive, so that when it changes, React detects that, and it re-renders the template where we output that value, and we see the new value in the browser. Now, to do this in React, we use something called a hook, and that hook is called useState. So hook in React is a special type of function that does a certain job, and you can tell a hook by its name because it starts with the word use. So the useState hook gives us a way to make a reactive value and also provides us with a way to change that value whenever we want. So in order to use this useState hook, first of all, we need to import it at the top of the file. So we say import, then curly braces, because we're going to destructure the useState hook, and that is from the React library. So this grabs us the function from the React library, and now we can use it inside our component. So let me just comment out this stuff right here and also delete this inside handle click. And instead, we're going to make a reactive value using useState. And the way we do this is by saying useState, which is a function, so we invoke it, and we give this state an initial value. So, for example, Mario. Now, we want to store this in some kind of value because at the minute, we're not storing it, we're just invoking the function. So the way we do that is by saying const, and then we use array destructuring to grab two values that this hook returns to us. So, first of all, the first value is this initial value. So we can call it what we want. I'm going to call it name. And the second value is a function which we can use to change that value. And most of the time, you're going to see this called set, and then whatever we call the value. So in my case, name. So now, if I was to use this value in the template, it's going to get us whatever the value of that state is. So Mario to begin with. And then if we want to change that value, we can use this function to do it. So I could say down here, set name, and pass in a new value. So I could change that to Luigi. And this value is reactive, this state value. So if it changes at any point, it's going to change in the template as well. So when we use this function to change the value, that triggers React to re-render the component. And when it re-renders, we have that new value of name because it's been updated. All right. So let me test this out. I'm going to save it and come over to the browser. And now if we click on this, we see it changes to Luigi. Awesome. So now this is reactive. So we can use this hook as many times as we want in a component for different values. And this value can be anything. It can be an array, it can be an object, it can be a boolean, or it could be a number. It really doesn't matter what the data type of the state is that we're using. So let's do another example, which is going to be a number. I'm going to call this age. So I'll use array destructuring to say the value is called age, and the function I'll call set age, and we'll set it equal to use state again, and we give this an initial value, which I'm going to set to be 25, right? And now I can output that. I'm going to say name is, and then output the age, and then I'll put years old after that. So this should say Mario is 25 years old to begin with. If I save it and refresh, then we can see Mario is 25 years old. Now, if I click the button, I want to use the set age function to update this to be 30. And also remember, we're updating the name as well. So it should now say, after we click, Luigi is 30 years old. So let's give this a whirl. I'm going to refresh. And if I click on this, it says Luigi is 30 years old. So when you need a reactive value, something that might change at some point, we use the useState hook to do that. We pass in an initial value, and we can output that value in the template. And then we just call the set function, the second value we get in this array, to update it. And that triggers a re-render, and the new value is going to be output to the browser in this template. So we're going to be using this hook a lot as we go forward. Alright then gang, so before we go any further, I just wanted to take a quick sidestep and let you know about an extension for Chrome and Firefox called React Developer Tools. And you can find it for Chrome on the Chrome store right here. Just click on the install button. Mine says removed because it's already installed. And you can also get it for Firefox by going to the Firefox add-ons library and installing it right here. So I'll leave the link to both of these pages down below so you can install whichever one you need. So what React Developer Tools do for us is integrate with the browser development tools and give us extra features that we can use on any website created with React. So if we take a look over here, we can see two extra tabs. We have Components and Profiler. Now the one I use the most is Components right here. And this basically gives us a component diagram or component tree of our current application. So if we just take a nosy at these things, if we hover over one of these different components, we get some extra information about that component down below. So this first one right here, this is to do with props. Now we've not covered props yet, so this isn't going to make much sense at the minute, so we'll move on for now. And down here we can see the source file. We also get some tabs over on the right as well, or rather icons. Now if we click on this one, this is to do with suspense, which is kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial. This one right here, we can click on this to find whatever DOM element this represents in the elements tab. So if I click on this, then it grabs us this div with the class of app. And remember, that is the root element inside the app component right here. So it finds us that element. Now if I did that for a different component, for example the navbar, if I click on this, it grabs us the navbar, okay? Okay, so this one right here, this logs all of the data about the component to the console. So if I was to click on this, then go to the console, we can see all of this information about the app component, including any props, the DOM nodes, the location of the file, etc. So this one right here, the app component right here, so it finds us that element. Now, if I did that for a different component, for example, it's kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial, this one. So if we take a look over here, we can Chrome store right here. Just click on the install button. Mine says remove because it's already installed. And you can also get it for Firefox by going to the Firefox add-ons library and installing it right here. So I'll leave the link to both of these pages down below so you can install whichever one you need. So what React developer tools do for us is integrate with the browser development tools and give us extra features that we can use on any website created with React. So if we take a look over here, we can see two extra tabs. We have components and profiler. Now the one I use the most is components right here. And this basically gives us a component diagram or component tree of our current application. So if we just take a nosy at these things, if we hover over one of these different components, we get some extra information about that component down below. So this first one right here, this is to do with props. Now we've not covered props yet, so this isn't going to make